help somebody if you want to.
Welcome back to the Reach Out Radio broadcast podcast, audio video experience and experiment here at the Voice 17104 in beautiful Allison Hill in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. With me in what we like to call the sauna, it's cranking 90 out, but I like to think we keep it 95, or as the young folks say, 100 in here in the studio. With me here is Bill Jameson.
Yep.
What's up?
Hey.
How's your throat?
It's all right. It's all right. I had some coffee, went down the wrong pipe, as they say. As it truly is probably descriptive of what happened.
Yeah, it's true. I saw it. I saw it happen. I saw it go down.
At least I spit it back in the cup, right?
Yeah, that's true. We had some mics that were getting real scared. If they could talk.
Everything's all right. I'm ready to go.
Terrific. And someone else who was ready to go this week, our old friend, Mr. John McCain, finally took that walk into the next world. And as Mark Twain once said, I never hope for anyone's death, but sometimes I smile when I read certain obituaries. It goes something like that. I can get the exact quote in a minute.
I get that quote. I might use it again.
Everything I see is just so positive in the way that he was perceived back in 2001 or 2003.
If that stuff is believed, then we have a real misunderstanding of ourselves, our history, our involvements around the world, and John McCain too. I mean, if this is what we truly believe, that's what that whole thing was. For example, I thought when they were saying that he fought for freedom of America, that they were talking about like he fought in the Revolutionary War, and that
he's
he was taken a prisoner.
Yeah.
I thought maybe the British had taken him captive, but it turns out that they were talking about Vietnam. He fought for my freedoms in Vietnam.
That's a neat trick.
That Vietnam had anything to do with freedom of America or freedom in this country. Anybody who continues to believe that Vietnam was a fight for our freedoms, if that's your understanding of history, then okay.
That's a narrative, and that's just what everyone's going by and just accepting.
We're not talking narrative, we're talking history.
Oh, I'm sorry, is there a difference?
Yeah,
there should be. There absolutely should be.
You say a man who was tortured is a man who then doesn't believe in torturing others. But John McCain was a man who was very, very ambiguous on this. One day he was on one side of torture, and the next day he was on the other side of torture. I said, here's a man who didn't learn anything from being captured by his enemy. Here's a man who was held prisoner in an Asian country because he was dropping bombs on Asian people. And when he was in charge of the Senate Foreign Relations or Foreign Affairs or whatever that committee was, he brought as his hero, his worship piece, he brought Henry Kissinger, the man most responsible for the bombings, the carnage that we caused in Laos and Cambodia. And this was his hero. This is a man who had opportunity to be around Asians for some time.
Oh,
he didn't learn anything.
Hillary Clinton's hero as well. And apparently John McCain was Hillary Clinton's hero too, with that drinking contest they had back in Eastern Europe in the early aughts. They're very chummy.
Well, Eastern Europe. That brings up Ukraine. Wasn't it him and Victoria Nuland who was there toasting the Nazis? Wasn't it there him and Nuland who was encouraging the Nazis to have a violent revolt against their own government? And wasn't he the one who every time he went there and left, new arms would be shipped there so that they could kill their own countrymen in the eastern part of their country and then be so concerned that they might want to return to Russia?
Well, we can talk about really any foreign situation in which the U.S. has been involved with in the past 20 to 30 years. And his view on it is always one of interventionalism and one
And
of
bombing.
militarism and
Bombing.
one of
Bombing.
and
Never
another way
met
to
a
say
war he didn't
bombing,
want to have or a place he didn't want to bomb.
it's to make money for military contractors, and that was his thing.
That's his close buddies.
Yeah.
And today's his birthday, by the way.
Huh.
And his other close buddy, Lindsey Graham, of like mind. Who else is speaking today? Is it today or Friday? What's his name? The Biden. Biden, who lost his own son to cancer that was caused by a military contractor cheating on the economics, making money off of the war and having burn pits instead of incinerators.
Biden, who is going to be pushed in front of the Democratic ticket like Hillary Clinton was in 2016, who's going to be trying to be foisted upon us as some kind of Trump alternative. And probably one of his main campaign slogans will be, at least he isn't Trump. But we know who Biden is the same way we know who McCain is, the same way we know who Hillary Clinton is. We know who Lindsey Graham is. We know who these people are and what they represent, however people want to choose to paint them. But the bad part about painting them in this way is, to a degree, the ideas that they had and the words that they said are kind of granted authority. They're granted, some sort of legitimacy. The idea is like, oh, well, maybe it is good to intervene here. Maybe it is good to be interventionalist and highly militaristic. Maybe that's a good thing because Father John McCain said so, our great father.
Well, like you said, there is a difference between history and narrative. And narrative, it makes us that great American nation when we look at our great American heroes, such as John McCain. John McCain, they say, he was such a gentleman. He tried to reach across the aisle. He tried to accept everybody. He wanted to hear everybody's ideas. And one example they keep throwing up, two examples they keep throwing up, and one I'm going to mention myself, is like the woman who said to him, Barack Obama is an Arab. And he answered her, he said, no, he's a good family man. Like Arabs can't be good family men.
I hear what you're saying.
He didn't answer her and say, no, he's not an Arab.
Of course not.
And so what if he were?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to credit Colin Powell with giving that exact answer. He's not an Arab, but so what if he was? What difference should it make in America? But that's not the answer that John McCain gave. He says, no, he's a good family man. And they keep throwing that as an example of his reaching out and being a gentleman, And the other example that I myself would like to mention, because they always talk about being accepting of other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy who apparently told people that he read a lot when he came out of prisoner war camp, wanted to read everything and know everything. Okay, well, he missed a couple of things.
That's nice. I mean, that's nice, I guess. But
when Pink Code came to protest for peace, and he had them kicked out of a Senate hearing, he called them the lowest scumbags on earth. You want to talk about Donald Trump? John McCain called people the lowest scumbag on earth when they exercised their First Amendment rights and advocated for peace before the government of the United States, before the Senate, before his committee.
I recall the example of when Snowden was in Hong Kong and they were giving him asylum briefly. And then McCain pretty much threatened to carpet bomb Hong Kong if they didn't give him up within 24 hours, saying that you're either with us or you're against us.
Yes.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
That sounds much like George W. Bush.
George Bush. Hey.
Old 43.
Hey. But, I mean, this is how we celebrate history or how we celebrate narrative. You understand? There is a difference. We're talking history here, and you can take your judgment on what side of history you belong. If you believe that it's okay for what Henry Kissinger did, and then you say, oh, John McCain was a very smart and moral and ethical man.
Let's get into that for a moment, because I understand that, true history or the true accounting of facts that happened in the past is different than narrative, but is not the writing of history and pretty much the profession of history back to Herodotus and back to all those old historians, is that not just generally narrative too?
A lot of it, of course. But what the historian is trying to do is discuss his particular narrative in a way that it's evidential of the data that history gives to us. It's not incidental to the data, you know. And these narratives are constructed incidental to the data, not using the data. The reasons that we got in Vietnam is important about a discussion of our history. The reasons that Henry Kissinger did the things that he did in Cambodia is important to a discussion of our history. The narrative that how exceptional we are for doing it and in the doing of it is not historic. It's not based on anything that has anything to do with the realities that happen. It's just the way that we would like to have seen it.
Well, reality is often an inconvenient barrier for those who want to put forth their own narrative and control the conversation.
Well, okay, look, I mean, I don't want to change the subject, but just as a quick, in 1953, we caused a coup in Iran.
Wait, we wouldn't do anything like that.
Okay, well, just take this for discussion's sake, that in 1953, using Roosevelt's grandson as our CIA chief or head espionage agent, or active agent, or operations agent, or whatever you want to call him.
Is that Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s son?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Was it?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
That's who he would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we caused a coup, and we took out a duly elected. What was the name of Madarik or Masadi? We took him out, duly elected, and we put in a corrupt, barbaric Shah. Now, we did that, and that's a historic fact. You can read your own CIA report.
Talk about corrupt. Talk about just monomaniacal.
Yeah, okay.
It was that same guy.
The Battle for Iran is a CIA report that explains how we did this. Okay, anybody who has any doubts about it. But the fact that you leave that out of your story of what's happening in Iran today, and why the Iranians feel as they do about us, and why we are on this path that we're on with respect to Iran, unless we take that into account as a part of our database history, then we're not talking about in reality what's happening between Iran and the United States. If we leave out that we've always tried to take them out, or take out Russia, or take out North Korea, if we leave out the fact that we leveled that country in 1953. In our discussion of North Korea today, then we're not talking history. We're talking imagination and narrative from the exceptional point of view.
And as you may have alluded to, it's exactly the same in North Korea. We act as though the current situation there is a vacuum. Whereas in the 50s, we chose to carpet bomb 90% of their infrastructure and their buildings and killed a great number of their people. As though they are nothing.
1 out of 5 North Koreans were killed. And here, okay, today's news is that Pompeo will not meet with North Korea to discuss the treaty or agreement that we've been working on with respect to nuclear arms. And why is this that we won't meet? Why is it that I think it's General Sullivan, who announced that we're going to start up again the war games that we play, despite the fact that South Korea and North Korea are still meeting and trying to be family again? Why is it that while the government of the United States, the president who is responsible for foreign policy, says that we should talk peace to North Korea, and the generals in deep state say no, that the answer comes out no. Those talks are off. Why are the talks off? I'll tell you why the talks are off. Because North Korea had the audacity to write a letter to our president. And you know what he asked for as a negotiating piece, as a way to sit down and start the conversation? He asked that the Korean War be ended. He has
Oh,
that
you
a
mean
peace
the war-
treaty be signed.
The war that should have been ended 50, 60 years ago.
Yes.
That is for some unknown, well, not unknown, but for some strange reason still going. We still have 50,000 troops there,
Yes.
if not more.
And we're forcing South Korea to continue on a war footing despite the fact that they want to get along with their family in the North. In a country that they themselves didn't split up, was split up by us from the outside. You know,
But if we did that, we would have to give up all these things that have been said that North Korea is the great bogeyman, that they are developing nuclear weapons in order to bomb America, that they are some kind of sinister, hugely powerful force against which we must protect ourselves and to build up our defenses.
well,
We don't want to do that, right?
when we say to North Korea, we're going to continue our war games in the South, and then the next thing out of our mouths is those people have the audacity to say maybe they won't give up their nuclear bombs. You know, what's wrong with those people? Don't they understand who we are and what we want? Don't they know how exceptional we are and what we could do to them if they don't do things our way? What's wrong with those people? Didn't we do enough to show them by killing 1/5 of their people how powerful and strong and righteous we are?
We're righteous.
Well,
We're righteous. Oh, well, some of the stories into which we're going to go today are going to say much to the opposite of the fact that we should call ourselves righteous. But that's what we like to think of. That is truly the image that we like to put in front of the world. We like to be that tower on a hill. We like to be that candle in the wind. No, that's an Elton John song. But we still like to do it. We like to be that
Yeah.
light in the darkness.
Mm.
We like to put ourselves forth as the savior of humankind instead of the destroyer of humankind, which is a little more apt.
I am become death.
Destroyer of worlds, or at least
Destroyer of
one.
worlds.
At least one world.
No, plenty. We're
Oh.
talking right now that those doggone Syrians, you know, they got one little deposit now of some terrorists left in their country. The remaining of what used to be called al-Nusra. It has another name now, which I can't remember. It's a 3-word name. But the al-Nusra people who are left in, what's it called? Idlib. And they're about to get pushed out of Syria, and that whole thing will be over. Now, even before it starts, the United States is saying that the Syrian government intends to use chemical weapons. For what reason, God knows that they would use chemical weapons when they got this thing finished, basically. And the United States, you know, says that if they use chemical weapons, that we're going to definitely, you know, do something about it. I have a quote by Bolton in which he says that we're going to give them a very strong response, you know. And there's a very interesting article by Seymour Hersh, you know, the reporter Seymour Hersh. He says that the last time that happened, when we accused them of using a chlorine bomb, that he investigated, and what he shows in his investigation is that there's no such thing as a chlorine bomb. He said, well, what would you do with a chlorine bomb? I mean, you drop it, the gas goes off, and that's the end of that. And then it turns out that we said that it was a chlorine serum gas mix. And what Seymour Hersh found in his investigation was that when you mix chlorine with sarin gas, the chlorine actually takes the hydrogen molecules away from the serum, rendering it harmless. So you would never mix the two as a weapon. You know,
Well, Seymour Hersh is doing some great journalism still.
Yeah.
There was a piece. I gotta find it. I won't mention it yet, but it was a good one.
well,
He's still writing.
he's still writing. Nikki Haley, our great and bombastic ambassador to the UN, she said, should they use that gas again, the United States is locked and loaded. Now, Seymour Hersh article tells us that there's no such thing. And I think that she should probably read Seymour Hersh's article before she runs her mouth again. But still, again, I mean, what Bolton said was Syria is about to use chemical weapons against, and he said ISIS. We're talking on Israel. We are prepared to act. We will respond strongly. You know, in both these cases, they're saying to us preemptively, and the white helmets are said to be sneaking in this some chemical agents. And by the way, the white helmets are being snuck out and in of Syria now. And you know, we made a statement to the white helmets that they can't come to the United States. I don't understand, since they're such the good guys, the white helmets, why we won't allow them into this country. Why do we have them on a terrorist list? There's something contradictory about how we're treating them and what we're saying about them. But at any rate, they're smuggling and they're sneaking in some chemical weapons so that they can we can say preemptively that when they use them, we're going to strike. Now, I have two questions about this. You know, one is that I don't believe that they would use chemical weapons at this point in Syria. They have no need, and I don't believe that they ever did. But that's a whole other question here. We could argue that. But they have no need to use them now. And number two is, who are we to say to people, if you use a chemical weapon and kill some of your people, we're going to punish you by killing a whole bunch more of your people? Who are we that we go kill people to stop you from killing people? I mean, what makes, what are we, the enforcer? I mean, what are we, who is that, the Terminator? Is that
That's an
guy?
appropriate name for us,
I mean,
though. It's pretty much who we are and what we do.
What is our position here? That
termination.
And why do Americans accept that we're allowed to do this in the world? That we're allowed to say somebody, we're going to kill a whole bunch of your people in punishment for something your leader did. What gives us the right to just go bomb other people because we don't like something, you know, in case it did happen, which I don't believe, but just in case, if we don't like something you did, what gives us the right to go and kill your people? I mean, Haley and Bolton, they say I mean, we're locked and loaded. I mean, we're going to give a strong response, just like it's our thing, our responsibility, our onus. I mean, this is our burden in the world. This is the white man's burden now.
It's a question I think about a lot, to be honest. And I don't necessarily think that non-interventionalism in any way is the answer either. I'm not saying we have a responsibility. And I would certainly think that we should get our own house in order first. And it's nowhere close. We should also be very reflective on what we've done in the past as well, and how we've intervened. And you could look at the whole history of our intervention, even starting in 1900, just looking at North, Central, South America, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, obviously the Koreas, Europe, anywhere that we have intervened, and just take a close look at it and see if it was really for humanitarian purposes. And if it is, maybe try to explain that to some people, some civilians who have died as a result. Look at Yemen. Just take a look at Yemen.
You have to be totally abstract to say that there's a question about intervention. You can't go by what intervention has been, almost 100%.
If it's what it's been, then it's a negative thing.
Then, I mean, that's intervention. Intervention is only what it is. It's not what you can imagine it to be. You know, I can't imagine a good intervention.
How about, I know it's the one historical example that works for it, but the Nazis in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about that. You know,
Napoleon in the 1800s,
and even us and World War I and all that kind of stuff, and what set that up and how we brought that stuff about, and our
America in 2020 when they come to get us.
Our own ideas. I mean, our own anti-Semitism, our own experiments with eugenics. I mean, our own Nazism. And certainly we can't argue from the position that we're in today with this hegemony that we have going on in imperialism that we're striking around the world. You know, so I don't know from what position we could ever argue that. It has to be mighty abstract.
Abstract. Yeah. I don't know. I still think about it. And maybe that's just, my indoctrination speaking.
Yeah, well, when you
perhaps.
say humanitarian intervention, I mean, that's like saying military intelligence. I mean, that's a conundrum. When has there been that? I know humanitarian has been the excuse for, i.e., Libya. Look how humanitarian that was.
Syria.
And yeah, right.
If we're looking even for a current example,
so I mean,
Afghanistan was purported to be a humanitarian intervention.
We've been in
as was
Afghanistan
Iraq.
17 years.
Iraq was a joke of a humanitarian intervention from the start. They barely paid it lip service. They did a little bit. They said it at least.
So wherever this abstract fantasy humanitarian intervention may happen at some point somewhere, then we could say that would be good.
Sounds good.
Okay. And that needle in the haystack is a long way from being found.
And as we wrap this segment up, just want to wish John McCain once again happy trails to wherever he's going.
And happy birthday. Today is his 82nd birthday.
Yeah, and I got to get that exact Twain quote because it's a good one.
Yeah,
but
I got that. He was not one of my best friends or beloved people.
No,
John McCain guy.
No. I mean, honestly, in the early aughts, like I was, before I really knew about him, I was kind of into the idea. I was like, wow, this guy's kind of conciliatory. He like talks to people on the other side of the aisle. Yeah, he's all right. He's a war hero.
Yeah, wrong war, wrong hero. In terms of how we see wars, the only good hero would have been H.W. And John F. Kennedy. They fought in World War II, did some heroic things.
How about Teddy Roosevelt? Yeah.
Well,
he rough rode his way to the top.
He sure did. Him and the Negroes.
Who he then forgot.
Yeah. Okay.
As is unsurprising.
But today, lying in state is Aretha Franklin. And there is a homegoing that we should all celebrate.
True. Yeah, absolutely right. So I've been following it. I'm sure you have. I'm sure y'all have. But the largest nationwide prison strike, I believe, in U.S. history.
Yeah.
I believe it's the biggest strike in U.S. history right now.
And Canada.
Canada, too.
Yeah, there's, I can't think of the name of the prisons in Canada that are on strike as well. And their demands are a little bit different because they're much better treated, apparently, in Canada.
Oh, you mean they're not allowed to be used as slave labor or to be treated as subhuman?
Right. That part, they do work, but they get paid actually.
Interesting.
I
mean, I know they've received some concessions already, but certainly nothing on that front. They don't want to actually give up their cash cow.
Well, first, two things. One is, three things. One, we passed the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment says that if you're convicted of a crime, you can still be used for indentured servitude.
Oh, and it was very definitively written purposefully in that way.
Okay. And then two, we wrote a federal law that said if you go to federal prison, you must work. So you don't have any choice but to work if you go to federal prison. And then three, we have the corporations in the United States that are very willing to use prison labor. I'd like to mention some of the top users of prison labor. The McDonald's Corporation, that fine maker of hamburgers, they have been using prison labor, for example, to make their plastic straws that they've been damaging the environment with.
Sure.
The American Airlines, you know what they use prison labor for? Callers. When you make a call and they make a call, people who answer and talk on the phone.
That's cruel and unusual.
Yeah, hey, I'm telling you. You're making these, scheduling flights for people who are free as a bird to fly here and there from a prison cell or a prison phone bank.
No, having known people who worked at call centers, they'd probably rather be in prison.
Yeah.
No, it's not that bad.
They
It's
can
not
have
quite.
the same job.
It's not quite that bad.
They can
But
have the same job.
to be in prison and then
Okay.
also have to work a terrible job and not earn money for it.
Microsoft,
Hmm.
Walmart,
Yeah, it's unsurprising.
Victoria's Secret.
I remember that one from last year.
And Whole Foods.
Mm.
And these are some of the people.
No, I was just about to go down to Whole Foods again on Saturday. They got a nice selection down there in Lancaster.
Yeah, well,
And they're, of course, allied with Amazon.
oh my God, that's 2 strikes there.
I'm sure Amazon has this whole problem, too, with
Oh,
prison
yeah,
labor.
you know,
It seems right up their alley, right in
yeah.
their wheelhouse.
and don't forget, the United States government has its own manufacturing corporation through which they make military equipment and military gear, such as helmets.
The helmets, yeah.
You know, all of the helmets are made by prisoners.
Lowest bidder.
You know, 25 cents an hour.
That they don't even get.
No,
Like, for one, it's 25 cents an hour, which is incredibly insulting. But second, you don't even get it. You have to pay your board at prison. You have to pay to be in a cell.
most people come out of prison in debt because they owe the prison.
Huh. Well, that's a nice way to get right back in,
Of course.
to violate your parole.
Of course.
Of course, the whole
Yeah.
parole system is seemingly set up to violate you and to get you back in that recidivism process regardless.
Well, you know, in Norway, we talked about them before.
Hmm.
People in Norway, they have the most, let's say, they treat you more like people would be treated in the real world. They allow you to work, for example, you know, they allow you to vote, for example. They treat you still as if you are a citizen, and they still treat you like who was that, Cole Dorsey, who said that this strike was a declaration for humanity, a declaration of humanity. This is what they do in Norway. They treat people with humanity, and you know what did you call it? Recidivism.
Recidivism, yeah.
That's when you return to prison after being in prison, right? Yeah. You know what their recidivism rate is? It's less than 20%. It's less than 20%.
Wonder what ours is.
70 something percent?
Wow.
80 something percent?
Is it that high?
It's very high. It's very extremely high.
Unsurprisingly.
You know, no. 20%. When you treat people like human beings and continue to treat them as civilized and give them responsibilities of being a citizen.
But also, when you're not trying to set up every institution of the state as something to make profit and to privatize, when you actually are willing to spend public funds on prisons and on infrastructure and education.
Here's a
and-
word.
Huh.
Rehabilitation.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Well, we're about 20 steps away from that in the prisons in the U.S.
We don't even want you, when you get out of prison, to feel as if you are a citizen any longer, because we take away all your citizen rights.
Can't vote. Can't
You
live
can't
in those
even get a
places.
loan. You can't go to
often
school.
Can't get health care or welfare.
Come on, we take away everything that you, as a citizen, are entitled to.
Food stamps.
Right,
In
and
many
then
places.
we expect you to stay on the streets and be a gentleman.
No, we don't.
Oh, I'm
Nope.
sorry.
No, we expect you to reoffend, and we
And go
expect
back.
you to dig yourself in even deeper.
Oh, and then you can make more straws.
Hmm.
Hey, that's a worthy profession, learning to make plastic straws.
And what is unsurprising about all of this is that it's getting almost no attention in the mainstream media. It is getting no big pub.
Are
It
they
is
getting
not
any?
hardly
I
any.
didn't see any. I mean, in the mainstream media, I didn't see any. I would look.
You, of course, see it on Democracy Now! And The
Yeah, like
Intercept
that.
and other leftish
Right.
publications. But you go to CNN.com, I doubt you'll see it.
You won't see it.
You go to FoxNews.com, you won't see anything.
Go to CBS, go to ABC, go to NBC, go to MSNBC, the so-called progressive arm of NBC, and look for it. You know,
Is Rachel Maddow talking about
yeah,
this?
Yeah, go to Facebook and look for it. Yeah,
I see it, but it's because
you gotta
of
look
the
for it.
groups that I belong to.
Uh-huh.
They talk about it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is where we stand. You know, uh, people are trying to talk to us, but our media, like I said many, many times about what is and what is not fake news. The first thing that is fake news is the news that they don't tell you. That which is a part of your news day that they keep away from you, that they keep hidden, that they keep secret. And here is one. There is a prison strike in 17 states, at least in the United States and in Canada as well. You know, here's another. I said this thing about fake news. I want to say just very, very briefly. You know, I saw this news on it was on local this morning, and it had to do with this Maple Donuts video that the police in York made, uh, and they got into some kind of video making contest, and they used Maple Donuts as the as a part of what they were doing, and reflecting the police going to Maple Donuts, et cetera, and this relationship between Maple Donuts and the police. Well, the NAACP got upset because what they said was Maple Donuts, if you recall, told us that black athletes have no reason to protest, that black athletes should not kneel during the national anthem or raising of the flag or whatever they call that thing, you know. So the black people did not like Maple Donuts for saying this. Now, the mayor, he puts out a statement today and says he was unaware that the NAACP and through the NAACP, the colored people in New York were upset about Maple Donuts. But when they told this story on the news, they did not tell us why the colored people of York were upset. Even with that young black lady, I'm talking about the local CBS affiliate, Channel 21. You know, went along with this, they left it vague. The mayor said, I did not know that there was reasons for the black community to be upset, you know, and they did not tell us why the NAACP or the colored people were upset when they told us the news story. They just said vaguely that there were some concerns. But if they would have told us that what Maple Donuts said had to do with kneeling, we would know that the mayor had to know. Because kneeling is something everybody's talked about. Because no kneeling conversation has gone unnoticed. But when we know better on the news and we make vague what is definitive, and therefore allow a statement that does not recognize truth, reality, a way of getting out of taking responsibility, we cannot recognize that as being what is happening in front of us. So now we didn't tell people what is really happening. Now we didn't tell people what this man really knows. Now we did not tell people why people are upset. What did we do the story for? To say we did the story. You understand? To say, oh yeah, we do all the stories, but we don't tell you about the story. We do a story and don't tell you the facts. We do a story and don't tell you what it's about. We tell you do a story and let the vagueness play. That's fake news. That's false news. That's telling people something by telling them nothing. Or by telling people nothing, pretending to tell them something.
Here, I was hoping to just, you know, sit back and enjoy the football season as if, you know, I were just a fan back in 1991, as if though everything were all right, and as if there wasn't a big presidential controversy with kneeling, and that was actually taking away from a huge issue that football actually has, which is, of course, concussions and health and other racially charged things. And just to speak on the kneeling for a bit, the Cowboys, how about them Cowboys? Well, it shouldn't be surprising, I guess, but I did not know that Jerry Jones and his boys were such ardent Trumpers and authoritarians in that way. But of course, if their big players would actually refuse to play and stand and kneel anyway, I mean, they're gonna back down. They just will. So I hope it happens.
Well, I'm actually, something, I'm very disappointed. We went through a whole year last year, and Kaepernick still doesn't have a job.
And it's not that he's bad.
And nobody, but what it's the silence on it that I'm disappointed with. It's the silence. There is so much of this happening, and all of a sudden, those people who started to kneel and whatnot and started to express their voice, I'm waiting to see if they're going to continue down that road and going to really express their voice, continue to express their voice, and continue to really be black men. Or just high-paid athletes. I'm waiting to see.
The thing is, there's almost no way to prove that it's some sort of concerted effort to keep him out. Because if you say it the right way, you could easily just say, oh, well, we don't think he was a good fit, or we don't think he was talented enough, or we don't think he could run our offense, or any other number of things that could sound innocuous, albeit there's really another reason why you're not trying to sign him.
You have to try him out to do that.
A few people have.
They invite him, but did they really try him out?
I don't know. No, and it's one of those things, and I don't know.
I remember when he was invited to the Eagles, but nothing happened.
Yeah, my girlfriend always says that, she likes wrestling, and I'm like, wow, that's what's his name? Vince McMahon. He's this, terrible, misogynistic, just a real bad dude. But then she's like, well, you like football. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. I mean, look at Goodell. Goodell, he is part and parcel, fully just at the whim and the behest of the owners. But that's not something we didn't know. We knew that was the case. But so much unlike the NBA, I'm not saying Adam Silver is a perfect commissioner, but Goodell is just authoritative. It's like my way or the highway. I want to get in here and punish you and set a tone in that way. Like y'all are my workers and I'm your master.
We used to idolize a lot of coaches like that. Green Bay and coach. He make them wear a tie and so forth. He gave them a curfew. He taught me.
Oh, Lombardi.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then there was that Bear Bryant who said, "Oh, I got to get me one of those."
Yeah,
he's like, "They're good. I got to get me some of those."
Yeah, he said, "There's he's going to get some that are better than theirs."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in his day, that was almost enlightened.
Yeah, well, this is I heard somebody say this morning. Who was it? Say, it's a shame that they're starting to use sports for politics. They were referring to the NFL kneeling controversy, and that it should be a controversy. Is the controversy? And I'm saying to myself, like, really? I mean, where have you been all my life? How could there be the first Negro in baseball if that wasn't the case? Why was there Jackie Robinson? I mean, for crying out loud.
Clearly, they want this to be a thing, because if they ignored it, this would be over. This wouldn't even be in the public eye. This wouldn't even be a thing. People would silently do their protests and then play the game. And if they really wanted to do it, they would just skip the anthem entirely, like they used to do.
Yeah. Well, they paid to play the anthem now and do all the rigmarole around it because we're advertising our militarism. We're advertising our passion for war. We're advertising our army. That's what the NFL is all about now.
Well, before the game, when I go to a game, when I can afford to go to a game, which is once every 5 years, when I see the rockets' red glare and those bombs bursting in air, I just knew that night that Goodell would be there, and it just warmed my heart. No, it's ridiculous. You see the flyovers, you see the planes, and you see the fireworks, and you see the recruitment booths at every little turnstile. And
Don't forget halftime. All the people marching, carrying the flag, marching out, and people getting there.
yeah, so
Veterans meeting their kids after being away for 5 years or something. I mean,
whatever happened to, the saying that you should not disgrace the flag in any way by making it part of a jersey or by part of a display, and yet you see flag jerseys and you see flag placards, and people are wearing flag pants and sitting on them, and they're like flag seat warmers. And
yeah, well, and then we prosecute people for desecrating the flag, but that's because they have a different narrative than the one that we want to express.
it's wildly inconsistent, hypocritical.
Well, yeah, and they don't intend to be consistent. They just intend to be in charge.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the Pope?
Probably. So
You got something good to say about the Pope?
maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. This Pennsylvania priest sex abuse report has really just sent ripples all around the world, and rightfully so. But the Catholic Church and really the people around the world in those communities have known that this has been going on for 80 years, if not
80?
more.
No, it's been going on ever since there was a Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The interesting, I mean, God, I'm sorry.
When was the time where marriage was outlawed in the Catholic Church?
I guess that goes back to
Middle Ages? Like 1200?
No, it's earlier than that. I was thinking it goes back to Augustine.
Huh. I didn't think it was that far.
Maybe it's not.
Because there was a point where,
he brought the celibacy and all that stuff. I mean, the womanizing guy, wasn't he the womanizing guy?
That would fit.
And he became the Pope, and he was with all these restrictive laws and stuff. But when you look at, I mean, okay, here now we have a letter from a cardinal to the Pope, actually to the world about the Pope, and about this this cardinal who was in D.C. I think he's retired now, but he was one of them. He came from Pennsylvania. And what he talked about was not only the abuse that happens in the church, but he talked about the abuse that happens in the seminary. He talks about this cardinal being instrumental in introducing what do you call becoming priest? If it's a nun, you call him a novitiate or something like that. But what do you call a priest? An apprentice priest, a guy who's going to become a priest, a guy in a seminary, seminarian,
an initiate?
Okay? Initiated?
Initiate? I'm not sure.
Anyway, these initiates got introduced or initiated into this practice while in the seminary through this cardinal. And my thought process says that this is not the only cardinal who initiates. And it's not a thing where the church is hiding something. It's a thing where this has been a secret of the church ever since. When we say it's hiding something, it makes it current. But what I'm saying is this is a secret of the church that's been going on ever since. And if it's being introduced in the seminary itself, before they come out to the churches, what I am suggesting is that the Catholic Church, in this sense, has been a cult. That this is a cult practice.
By cult, what does it entail when you say that?
Well, it entails, we talk about a non-legitimacy with respect to religion, and this is one of those crossovers that we use where religion and sex come into play together. It used to be something that was a part of religious practices, and a lot of what we condemned later on as cults, because they had this relationship, like, for example, where they would worship and sex would be a part of what happens on the altar. There could be a cult that practices demonism, but if one that practices sex, it's definitely considered a cult.
I mean, that was a facet of spiritual practice ever since spiritual practice existed.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting that it carried on in this church. Okay, this is a mighty leap. I agree. But I'm telling you my mindset, the way my mind works. if it's had been something that this guy was initiating in the seminary, I'm not thinking that he's the first or ever only one who's ever done so. And if this has been a practice in the seminaries, it's a practice that goes way back, and it's been a secret of the church for a long time. And in the process, this was a cultish practice of the church, you know.
Oh yeah.
And it comes out into the public in this way with these priests doing the things that they do. But it continues. For example, when you think in Pennsylvania that one of the things that they did to some of these youngsters that they were abusing was to mark them with a crucifix. Now, if that doesn't sound ritualistic and cultist to you, I don't know what does. You mark them with a crucifix as being the ones for the other priests to recognize as available within this ritualistic sexual practice.
So I just don't know if it's something that they tried to justify through some twisted version of their faith, saying that they're trying to purify them or save their souls or something messed up like that, or it is just some complete juxtaposition and hypocrisy where it's just, we have this thousands of years old edifice that many people trust, and that we can do what we want within its guise.
But wait a minute. And I don't want to get funny here, but you're saying something that they have to have a reason. And the whole thing about religion is that you don't. Your religious practices don't have to be reasonable. You know, it's not reasonable that Mary is a virgin. It's not reasonable that God is 3 in 1. You know, these things are mysteries, and these things you take on faith. And to imply that they would have to have some reasonable explanation for these rituals that they might carry on is non-religious.
I mean, yeah. I see what you're saying. They don't have to have reasons, but they do.
They do. They have archives full of. You see, that's another thing. You see, here's where I have my problem with the Pope. About this letter that was written about him, and about things that were said about him, which you talked about briefly before, that happened in Argentina, where he hid some people away who were responsible for abuse.
Every bishop around the world, save a few, did it. But this is the Pope.
Yeah, okay.
He's
Then
the Pope
that makes it pretty permeable, right? It permeated all over
Ubiquitous.
the place, right? I mean, what is it?
Ubiquitous. Everywhere.
Okay, so then it's a part of the church. This is what I'm trying to suggest. It's just a part of the church. It's not extra to the church. And they got records of it. They got archives. They got all these records of all these people who've done all these things that they don't submit to the public or the police or the criminal justice system. These are secrets in the church. And they go back forever. And there have always been secrets in the church. And even the Pope today, and this is where I have my big quarrel, is today he stands up and says that these things are criminal and that these things are hateful and that these things shouldn't be done. But I didn't hear anything about turning any records over on criminal people who've done criminal things and are liable for criminal things. I didn't hear anybody going to be prosecuted or anybody who's going to have to step down or any action that is going to be taken so that in the past, if anybody does any of these things, they will be considered doing criminal things. And they will be treated like criminals for doing criminal things.
Instead, you know what happens? They get shifted to another parish. They get shifted to another position. Sometimes even get promoted. And I saw
Pennsylvania guy, he went from bishop to cardinal.
I was reading in, I believe it was the bishop in Texas or the cardinal, who had often seen where they were trying to pass off offenders to him and saying, preaching the whole aspect of, forgiveness and second chances. And in a vacuum, okay, I get the idea. I understand the concept and I appreciate it. But just like he said, you are putting someone who has committed heinous acts against children in a place where they're not going to be closely monitored, because they can't really closely monitor them
Yeah.
in an entire
Yeah.
state or diocese or whatever they were.
Okay. But when we just report itself redacted the names of 30 priests who are still priests here in Pennsylvania, someplace, you understand? And do we know that these people did things and their names are redacted and that they're still active in the church and nothing will be done about them? We know that. And that's just our current state right here, even, looking at this report itself, So where is the church going from here? Are they going to out these 30 individuals? Are they going to charge them criminally? Are they going to do something? Or are we going to continue down the same path? Because what the Pope has said is only in language that he changed. Instead of saying that what they did was a sin, what he said was that what they did was a criminal act. That's the only difference in what he said from what you said the others have said in the past. And that he sent it out to more people than what they had in the past. That's the only difference, And yet the most important thing to me isn't even so much what they are doing or not doing to these criminals, but what about the victims? The victims who they deny.
Well,
The victims who they persecute.
the victims who they blame and who they send to psychologists and whose lives are demolished and who live with its guilt and shame over an act for which they had no responsibility. These are, speaking in the language of the church, these are souls that are lost, and it's your fault, and you're not doing anything about it. Yeah. Oh, I saw something great. The Catholic Church down on State Street, they had their service last week, and they hired an armed security guard to work outside. It was their forgiveness service. Oh yeah, these forgiveness services. That's what I wanted to talk about. That many local cardinals and bishops have called these services of forgiveness to have the public forgive the priests and the cardinals and the bishops who have committed these heinous acts. Look, just as a concept and idea, like, I'm all about forgiveness. I appreciate it, but it's a process. Like, it's not something that you should just do to absolve someone of responsibility or of guilt. There's so much more that goes into it. And you can't have a service in your area or in your state and then just brush everything under the rug and have it be okay. You just can't.
Yeah. They say to people, let's say it's your son, and you go to the church and say, my son has had this horrible thing happen to him. And the church says to you, think of the church. Think of what you're bringing on the church. Excuse me, but think of the church. I come to you about what my son has been a victim of, and you tell me to think of the church, and I'm supposed to respect you and your theology. I'm supposed to expect you and your religious values. I'm supposed to respect you and your morality.
You should be careful about that, because they say think of the church, and then people will think of the church and everything they've done to them and everything that they've tried to brush under the rug.
That's what happened in Ireland. The Pope went to Ireland. He got a real disappointment there. The people in Ireland, first of all, I mean, they had already lost faith in the church when they voted for abortion. And because the church had lost its respect there, it had lost its authority there. And of all places for the Pope to go, expecting to regain it, it didn't happen. The people didn't turn out in Ireland, as they had turned out in the past for the Catholic Pope. The Irish are no longer under the thumb because of the loss of credibility, ethical credibility on the part of the church itself. And that's going to happen other places as well.
And somehow the church still had ethical credibility. Who knew?
Yeah.
But still,
yeah.
Can't imagine.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they still are fighting in court. They still fight for laws that don't allow for prosecution, proper justice. You know, they still fight for ways to keep their files from becoming public. You know, they're still doing these things that keep what they do secret from the rest of us. The cultist practice.
And as I've said before, transparency is the mother's milk of justice and of social justice. And opaqueness, obfuscation, that shadowy darkness is just that catalyst of things like this. When you seek to obfuscate, when you seek to hide what you're doing, and I mean, I'm not talking about, if you have nothing to hide, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that. But if you are trying to create a system where this kind of act can go unseen and unpunished, or trying to perpetuate that system, then it's just, it's evil. Just plain and simple. If you believe in evil or not, this is evil. And they also have been lobbying to maintain the statute of limitations or to lower them on these kind of crimes.
Right.
They have been acting to say that, it has to be within 5 or 10 years of a crime that you can prosecute, whereas some of these happened 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for there to even be a statute of limitations.
You keep it a secret, and then you say there should be a statute of limitations for how long I have to keep this secret.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's really ethical. That's truly ethical.
Nah.
Yeah,
not
right.
Not really. Yeah. So let's see.
Time is getting short. What time is it? 30. Oh, okay. You still got some time.
So, I got the color of law here next. Not sure if we want to save that and do a more robust discussion.
Yeah, I will save that and have a little more robust discussion. Let me just say this, that I'm reading where during World War II in San Francisco, one of the areas that we thought of as being more progressive in the United States, I've been reading how the United States government used the USO, the United Service Organizations, that the USO was used to entertain the troops and maintain donut shops and places, service to servicemen who were fighting the war.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the United States government maintained them racially separate. They had a colored USO and they had a white USO. And San Francisco, where we talk about people being, more, we think, progressive, and how the government using these instruments of white and black, for example, it took over a Ford company that was making cars, and then of course it was making war material, and while it was making war material, they was told by the United States government that they could not discriminate amongst the workers, even though the union said that they had to discriminate amongst the workers. And this was during the war. But even the United States government maintained that they had to live in separate places. They could work together, but they mandated, and I will tell you the different laws when I
Sure.
They mandated that they live separately, mandated by law, and then how after the war, when the government gave that Ford plant back to Ford, how systematically the black workers were moved out and only the white union workers were allowed in, and this is the way that system worked, and how they used workers during the war and dismissed them after the war. And the USO got government money, The USO was congressionally chartered, It was an arm of the United States in that respect, even though it was considered private.
Like the Boy Scouts.
Like the Boy Scouts.
Are they? They are.
They're not private. They're private,
huh.
But they get subsidy.
And, Yeah, that's
But,
a whole other thing.
that's a whole
Especially
nother
when we're
way,
talking
yeah.
about sex abuse.
Right.
Anyway.
But here it was the United States using the USO to teach and enforce segregation. You know, that's just one example in the beginning of the book of how the government itself mandated segregation in our cities. I'll pick up from there. Now, and next time I'll tell you what laws were passed and how this thing operated during and after the war.
Sounds good. So we got to talk about this 10-year-old autistic boy in Denton, Texas, who was handcuffed for being autistic.
Mm. Hmm. He acted out.
He's autistic.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know what he did? He crawled into his cubbyhole. He didn't come out when I said come out.
I'm sorry. So why is this teacher pulling this guy, this young man, this kid out of his cubbyhole?
Because she told him to come out.
So was he causing any problems by being in that cubbyhole?
What problem could he cause being in his cubbyhole?
So perhaps he could have spent some time there and regained composure and then, come out on his own accord.
Entirely possible.
But that did not fit their authoritarian view of how school should work or how society should work.
Right. So they called the school correctional officer, the cop, who learns to do arresting things, police things, the way we teach police
To a 10-year-old.
to a 10-year-old. Held him down, knee on the neck, handcuffed him. It wasn't the first time, and he did it several times that day. You know what the real crime too? The parents had a contract or agreement with the school that they would follow certain procedures when the kid acted up and that they would be informed. None of those procedures that they agreed to were carried out.
So what was the point?
What's the point of making an agreement? You know,
Why waste your time trying to be a decent parent?
yeah. Why inform the school? Why try to work things out with the school so that it's possible for your son to attend school and become socialized?
And I've had lots of good teachers. I've had great teachers. I've had many good teachers. But I've had teachers like this. I've had teachers who would not accept disrespect or questioning of their authority and would make it a forced case about it, who would just take it as a personal affront, who would just take it to the next level. Like if you even just spoke out or said something out of turn, it's not something as simple as saying, mind your tone or, quiet down.
Mm-hmm.
But something in terms of just trying, like getting in your face and trying to establish dominance.
Mm-hmm.
This person did this with a 10-year-old.
With a 10-year-old. Handcuffs. I mean, just thinking. I mean, how incredulous does that sound to you? That you kneel on top of a kid, a 10-year-old, and put him in handcuffs, and do it more than once. He says to this kid, "Do you want to be in cuffs again? Okay, you asked for it," and puts him back in cuffs. When you act right, I'll take the cuffs off. Takes the cuffs off, and when the kid does something, puts the cuffs back on, and the kid saying, "Leave me alone, please." He ignores that and puts the cuffs back on because he's a law enforcement officer.
What's a police department school resource officer doing in an elementary school?
I don't know.
I mean, I understand high school, I suppose, to a degree.
Maybe.
And I don't even necessarily understand that. But what are you doing in an elementary school?
I don't know. I don't understand America. No.
If only this teacher would have been armed.
Yeah. Right.
Just imagine. This is, of course, there are so many reasons for teachers not to be armed, but Even something like this. If this kid just still refused to get out, what was the next step? Was his teacher going to whip out a gun? Was it going to
Yeah.
get that kind of violent with it?
Well,
Maybe.
this treatment that we're talking about here went on for 2 hours. You know, could you imagine? I mean, you give up 2 hours of your day as some kind of an officer to manhandle a 10-year-old?
Maybe it was
You
just
must
boring.
really have a big important job.
I was going to say, it's probably boring being a police officer in elementary school and, I don't know, just sitting around like watching kids at recess or whatever.
Yeah. So he had something he could do that day.
Yep.
In the same vein, I mean, and I would like to mention that Texas cop who's going to be who's convicted of murder. I wish I could think of his name. But what about this 87-year-old woman who was tasered by police in Georgia, in Chatsworth, Georgia?
Hmm.
You know what she was doing? She had a knife, okay,
So,
and it was these woods.
Hmm.
All right. They've said that she suffers from dementia, but right now that's beside the point. It's an old lady who goes out to the woods with her knife, and she cuts dandelions, and she brings them home and she makes a soup for her husband.
yeah, I know plenty of old women who do that. Well, not specifically that, but who go out and cut flowers, and whose business of it is yours?
That's what she was doing. She went across the street from her house into a woods. And apparently this woods is owned by this boys club who saw her going into the woods with a knife and called the police on this old lady who lives across the street. You know, like they hadn't seen this old lady before. They didn't know that this woman suffers from dementia. They didn't even know, I bet you, that she only spoke Arabic and didn't speak English.
They're
the
probably
woman-
just tired of her going in their woods.
They got, and so there's a woman going in the woods with a knife. And the cops came. And one of them was the police chief. And they told her to drop the knife, which she didn't understand because she didn't speak English. But the chief says he demonstrated to her, you know, how to drop the knife, which apparently she didn't understand his gestures. And then she turned and she walked towards them. And they tasered her in the chest.
So,
The question was, did she make any threatening move? And the answer was no.
well,
Did she threaten you with a knife? The answer was no.
Bill, I mean,
Was this 87-year-old demented woman threatening to you, big, strong officer? No.
Officer Crumpkey,
Yeah.
Officer Cupcake.
Oh, my gosh. You know, I mean, people, what is going on? This woman was arrested for trespassing and for obstruction of a police officer. What is that? Obstruction of a police officer. I tell you to drop a knife and you don't understand me, so I therefore obstructed you.
She disrespected him with her silence.
Oh.
Well, I can't. I could just not imagine. You know, my grandma coming up to me, my 5-foot-tall grandma with a knife, having been cutting flowers and feeling in any way threatened by it.
Yeah, drop those dandelions. Drop those dandelions right away.
Clearly, they knew what she was doing.
Yeah. But somehow it doesn't matter to them. You know, and this is where we have come as a civilization. This is where we have come as an exceptional society. This is where we have become in terms of living together communally, communities together.
You mean nowhere? We've come nowhere.
We've come nowhere. Wow.
Tremendous. So Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, unless you had more to
No,
say.
it's just incredulous to me.
Absolutely.
This police, by the way, just mentioned this. There is a cop. First name Roy, last name I can't remember. He shot a young man named Jordan Edwards in Texas a year, 2 years ago. You might recall the young men were in a car. They were leaving a party, and this officer, Roy, whatever his name is, he told the lie that they were backing the car up, trying to hit his partner, threatening his partner, and therefore he shot into the car, killing, I think, 16-year-old Jordan Edwards. His body camera gave to the lie. His body camera showed that the car was actually going away from them and not coming towards them. And in the jury trial, the officer who was his partner admitted that he did not, under those circumstances, feel the least bit threatened. Consequently, this officer, Roy, whatever his name was convicted of murder, and he's going to be sentenced, I think, next week. And we'll follow it, and I'll tell you what his name is. The family was surprised. Their family was surprised, and they said it goes a long ways towards some kind of closure. It cannot bring young Edwards back, but the mother said it should close this chapter, a little bit more peacefully, just a little bit more. An officer convicted here in the United States.
Yeah, that doesn't quite sound right, does it?
No, it's got to be an appeal.
Yeah. Indeed. So let's see what I got.
Verizon?
Yes.
Verizon?
Shifting gears to complaining about capitalism, as we like to do. One of the biggest perpetrators of just vulture capitalism and blood capitalism, literally, in this case, and of monopoly. Those firefighters out in California who were fighting that monstrous blaze, that terrible.
That one. I mean, how many fires were they fighting? Like 22 or so at one time?
And I like how you put it here, those dire fires in California.
Yeah.
How they were fighting, and I believe they had an unlimited data plan.
They had unlimited data. That's the
unlimited data.
Unlimited, right.
So at a certain point, if you're familiar with these,
if
you're familiar with these unlimited data plans, there's a point at which you get throttled, which is to say your speeds go way down and it's almost impossible to do anything. And they had used that, which I don't know was 20 gigabytes or 40 gigabytes or whatever the throttling threshold was. So this data, firstly, is not unlimited.
It's not unlimited. What's unlimited about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
these are first responders now. These are firefighters.
They called.
People using this data to fight fires and save lives.
They called in the midst of the fire and said, please on-throttle our data. We're fighting a fire. Verizon said, you must buy a different, more expensive plan. It's still unlimited, but it's more expensive.
You got the wrong unlimited data plan. And we're going to sell you.
You need the super unlimited plan. You need the limitless plan.
Well, even that I found out has its limits too. But go ahead, yeah. There's no unlimited plan.
What gets me is, well, firstly, how this is structured and what unlimited data plans really mean about unlimited data, because it doesn't. But also that they double down. That they got a call from someone fighting a fire, and instead of just on throttling the data and saying, you go fight that fire now.
We'll talk later.
It's like, nah, you got to wait. You got to pay us more.
You got to fill out another application.
And then in 24 hours, maybe we'll on-throttle your data now.
Got an app for that. This is what it comes down to. We talk about civilization and what we've come down to. You know, that we are talking about our first responders out there in matters of life and death, their own and ours. I mean, those of us who are in dire need of their services at those times when fires are raging around us. If you saw some of those fires and those fire tornadoes and it's the seriousness of the fires that they were fighting out there.
And perhaps it's anecdotal, perhaps, but many people have said it that these fires were the angriest fires they'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And these are firefighters. They've
These are
seen
firefighters.
fires.
These guys with long experience fighting fires. Yeah. Yes, long experience fighting fires.
I know.
And they said that this is the beginning of a new thing. They didn't say that this was a once in a lifetime thing. They said this is the beginning of a new situation that they are dealing with, and they named the culprit. The culprit is climate warming.
Yeah.
But Verizon, I mean, buoy for you.
When push came to shove, as they have done many times before, they showed their true colors.
Yes.
Which is to say, the essence of greed.
More green. Yeah. More green, the better. You go for it, Verizon. You know, with institutions like you, wow. Maybe those things that are happening to bring on socialism will happen faster now.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
There's that black guy down there in Florida who's running for governor. He was a Bernie Sanders. The closest he came to the Democratic Party was Bernie Sanders. And you know, doggone well, the established Democrats didn't back him. He was the mayor of Tallahassee.
Andrew Gillum.
And now he's going to run for governor. He has a good chance, a decent chance, apparently. And of course, the Democrats are now saying that it's an anti-Trump vote. And all they're going to do now is say, as in terms of their own campaign, we're going to continue to run against Trump. They don't recognize that this guy was backed by Bernie Sanders, not by the Democratic Party. He was backed by the progressive, the socialists, not by the Democratic Party. He was backed by those people who are picking up and walking away from the Democratic Party. And the party still isn't catching on. You got two women running in Arizona. One was that fighter pilot lady, more or less a moderate Republican, if there's still such a thing. And the other, and they said she went right when she started running, but she's still a moderate. I don't know what that means.
Well, they got McCain. McCain's a moderate Republican, right? Or
yeah,
he was?
Right. Yeah.
That's what a moderate Republican means now.
Okay. And the other one is this Democrat woman who, I don't know where she stands with respect to the party, but apparently she had it going until this this fighter pilot woman became a right winger, and then she picked up a lot of votes. I don't know what that says about what 2016 is about. 2018 is about.
Pretty much sums it up, I think. And this guy's platform, here's what you would expect. Medicare for all, transitioning away from fossil fuels, abolishing ICE, legalizing marijuana, reforming bail, taxing the rich and large corporations. So, yeah. Pretty standard, Democratic socialist platform. So, yeah. Good for you. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see.
Now it starts to get down to what do we want to talk about that's left? Because there's so many things left and so little time left.
I would like to talk about Reality Winner.
Reality what?
Reality Winner.
Reality Winner. Reality Winner. Sentence.
which is her
5 years.
real name. It's actually her real name.
5 years. What's that? 3 months?
Months.
In prison?
Mhm.
Under the Espionage Act. Under the Espionage Act. Wasn't she a reporter?
She was an NSA operative
NSA
who leaked
operative?
classified information to the press.
To the press. Oh, that's where it was. Okay. All right. So,
The longest in history, I don't know about in history, but received for an unauthorized disclosure of national defense information to the media.
what did she did whistleblower about?
I don't know the
Isn't this
specifics,
what
to
you
be
call
honest.
this, whistleblowing?
Yeah.
So she's the first Trump whistleblower to be prosecuted under the Trump administration, right?
Mhm.
And she got the longest one that anybody got. Huh?
Yeah, at least for this specific sort of disclosure, yeah. And this was originally outed on The Intercept, and usually I have nothing but good things to say about The Intercept, but they really screwed her on this one. Apparently, the documents she sent them had a certain watermark or a code on them that she printed. She printed all these documents out and sent them by mail to The Intercept, and this code or watermark was on them. And The Intercept apparently just published them straight out without obfuscating or removing that identifier.
Yeah.
And so the NSA identified her immediately, and they knew exactly who to prosecute. And they did.
I saw a picture of her where she was smiling.
Yeah.
I mean, she felt like she had done the right thing.
And the U.S. attorney who was prosecuting Reality, named Bobby Christine, and apparently asked her if she hated America, as she claimed. And this attorney said, "You don't really hate America, right?" As if anyone would ever claim to hate America. And Winner said, "I mean, yeah, I do. It's literally the worst thing to happen on the planet."
Wow.
Apparently, that was a reason to make her sentence even more severe.
Because of her opinion about America.
Because of what she thought. We're talking about thought crimes.
Yeah, okay.
Shouldn't it just be about what you did?
Yeah.
Not.
Well, maybe even not about that, but okay.
Yeah, probably not even about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not sure if you got this one, but almost half of Americans cannot pay for their own basic needs.
Yeah. Yeah. And they say, what about that?
Day to day, their day-to-day needs. They cannot. This is their basic stuff. They have to take loans. They got to borrow. Housing, utilities, food, or healthcare. Healthcare is clearly, the big one here.
Out of control, out of hand.
And not to get too personal, but you had some healthcare cost concerns last year.
I still have. They didn't go away. I got bills I still have to pay. At least I'm responsible for paying. But I see people in worse situations than me. I saw a guy this morning who thought he had insurance and he had a $120,000 hospital bill. And he had insurance. They won't pay $120,000 worth of his hospital bill.
Firstly, the hospital bill should not be $120,000 in the first place, because that's preposterous.
Right. I mean, we are allowing this. Look, how do you talk about it? Well, in what way do you want to talk about it? People can't pay their medical bills. Half the people can make their 90% of the people in America, if they had to spend $500 on an emergency, would be out of luck. I mean, these are half the kids how many kids? I don't remember, not half the kids, but a big number of kids who are in college are homeless. I mean, how many markers does it take to recognize the situation that we're in, and the fact that this rat hole that we're in is only getting deeper. How many markers does it take?
These people are food insecure. They are housing insecure. They're healthcare insecure. They are insecure. And I can almost guarantee that that means that they are psychologically insecure.
absolutely.
You can't build a stable life if you are worrying about where your next meal is going to come from, or if you get sick, where the money is going to come from. And we nearly stand alone amongst industrialized nations with this degree of expense in
Not
healthcare.
nearly. We stand alone. We stand alone as the bottom of, what do you want to talk about? Infant mortality?
Yeah.
Okay. We're at the bottom of infant mortality. We're at the bottom of all
Can't
the
e-
industrial nations in terms of people being insured.
We can't even protect babies.
We can't, yeah, I mean, yeah.
That should be the litmus test for one's morality.
But we can spend $716 billion on so-called national defense. And that's just the beginning figure.
That was a good one. National defense.
Yeah, right. National defense. $716 billion. It is nothing for us. Well, we go down to a country like Venezuela or Nicaragua to throw a couple of $1 million into a National Endowment for Democracy, NGOs, where we're trying to overthrow their governments. Another $1 million here or there doesn't mean anything to us. Another $1 million here or there to support al-Nusra, another $1 million here and there to pay Al-Qaeda in Yemen, that means nothing to us. Another $1 million here and there.
Yeah, I mean, what's $1 million? Right?
Right. But when it comes to our citizens, and we talk about income disparity, and we talk about becoming more and more an impoverished nation, that doesn't mean anything. It does not compute to our leadership.
That does not equate to patriotism or national pride.
Yeah.
Whereas
exceptionalism.
Whereas in my hierarchy, that would be one of the first things that would accrue nationalism or national pride.
Look at the exceptional way we take care of our people.
Look at the exceptional drinking water we get to drink. Look at the exceptional air we get to breathe. Look at the exceptional forest we get to wander in and camp in.
Wow.
Look at the exceptional roads on which we get to drive, and look at the exceptional hospital I get to visit for a very low cost or for free if I'm ever sick.
Yeah, like you're in Cuba. How about, you said drinking water and stuff like that. How about when we change a law in Louisiana to punish people for protesting pipelines and arrest people, that a private company and your local authorities, your state, should get together to arrest people for protesting things that are important to their lives in a democracy, so-called democracy.
They didn't pick up a spear and start spearing pipeline workers or anything, right?
No, what they did was, the law reads, and this is a very interesting thing. They passed a law. This is the energy transfer. What's the
energy transfer partners out of Texas, out of Oklahoma and Canada.
Well, they own this subsidiary down here called Bayou Pipeline.
They own everything, seemingly.
Well, Bayou Pipeline and the local authorities, they get together and they pass a law and say that we're going to make it extremely painful for you to step any place on our property when you protest. Okay, so they can arrest people for being on the property. Mm-hmm. Well, these people were then in canoes and kayaks on the river, you understand, not exactly on the property. And you could see on the video where the company boats are actually forcing these people more and more towards the shore. And then you see the state troopers pull them out of their boats onto the property and arrest them. Now, this is the state authorities, the state troopers, working with the corporation that is threatening the health and not to mention the crayfish industry down there by protesting a health destroying pipeline. This is a demonstration on videotape of fascism at work. This is where you should see the armbands and you should see the Nazi symbol when they're pulling them out of their boats and arresting them for protesting and taking away what was a First Amendment right while protecting the right of the corporation to be an individual.
And of course, that's one of the key facets of fascism, that intimate and almost indivisible connection between the state and corporate power. Especially, I mean, the Nazis, of course, but Mussolini and Italy.
Yeah.
And we see it here. We see it when people no longer have a voice in politics. We see it when corporations can pay unlimited money to politicians in order to get them to do what they want. We see that when money equals speech. And we see what happens when politicians are bought and sold. Look at Cory Booker. I'm not going to let him off the hook if he's trying to run for the election in 2020. You can't.
And for voting for war powers. For voting for war powers. Here's a man who complains about the president and yet gives him all the war powers he could ever ask for, and not ask for, because they had an opportunity to say that the president had to come to them, and they said that the president didn't.
They had to. He had to.
He had to. Cory had to.
I guess. It's one of those things, like, he already made that deal with the devil or whoever.
Yeah.
And then he got that call the night before the vote and said, You're voting the right way, right? And I imagine at this point it doesn't even need to be a call. It's just the implication.
Right. Yeah. Right. If you need a phone call now, then you're not one of the boys.
Something we haven't spoken about yet, but I think it's big. Actually, I'm not sure if it's big or if it's just for show.
What's that?
The DNC eliminating the power of superdelegates.
I don't think it's big. I don't think it's big. It would be big if they got rid of superdelegates. They didn't end the power of superdelegates. What they did was take away from the superdelegates their right to vote the first round. And what they did in that's one of those things where, you can say beforehand that so-and-so is guaranteed the race before the race is even started because she has all these superdelegates lined up and you can count their votes.
Of course, she was funding the DNC for about a year before the primary.
Yeah,
so,
Yeah. But she's not the only one. I mean, it's the establishment, but she used it more than any probably. I mean, Obama used it a couple of years before that, a few years. But she used it. But the superdelegates are still superdelegates, and until they get rid of the whole idea that people in the party who are special and have special powers because they are the established people in the party, until they just become just part of the party with respect to a general vote, then nothing will have changed because they are still super. They're still the establishment. They are still dictating to the party what the rules shall be, And hey, look, you got people in the Black Caucus who stood up for that. I mean, the so-called Black Caucus, stood up for that, not for the equalizing of votes, but for making certain people more powerful than other people. This is what they stood for, and for continuing that practice, And no, I don't think that it's a big deal, even though they're trying to make a big deal of it. I think that until the Democratic Party becomes democratic, that is not going to matter. As long as they're being run by these people who think of themselves as being super powerful, therefore super delegate, the super establishment, the super people who think that they should run the party and tell everybody else, and all the rest of us that form the base within the party don't matter when it comes to decision making, then it will still remain the party that it is today. And I still say, that still is happening, even though you got this Andrew
Cuomo
in Florida. Andrew, the black guy who's running for governor. You know, I mean, that doesn't make the Democratic Party any different. Those things like that, or the woman who's running in Brooklyn, or the one who's
Ocasio-Cortez.
yeah, huh?
Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, right, right. You know, none of those things change the Democratic Party. It doesn't change the establishment. And the Democratic Party, please, this guy is a Bernie uh, um, supporter and then supported by Bernie, but that has nothing to do with the Democratic Party.
So really, what's going to happen is either the party will shift or it will die.
Well,
About time.
yeah, it'll die. It'll die a rotten death. But there'll be some people who still be enriched by it.
But at the same time, I can't count the number of times lately that I had been, guilted for not voting for Hillary in the 2016 election, or for even considering that Tom Wolfe had any issues in his platform, or not wanting to vote for George Scott for representative in this Harrisburg election.
Yeah.
Because he's a new lefter, he's a centrist.
Yeah.
But the idea that for some reason we owe these corporate centrists anything is beyond me.
Yeah. I gotta go, but I just want to mention that I want to mention two things actually, real quick. I want to mention because it's important. I think what's happening with this little Napoleon guy, Macron. He said something very important yesterday, day before. He said that the European Union should no longer rely on the United States for its security.
For the EU Defense Force.
For the EU Defense Force.
Yeah.
And he also said that Russia, should be invited into the defense forces of Europe.
Well, that's nice.
This is a big change in thinking from continuing to advocate for adversarial relationships with Russia. This is a sea change. Inviting Russia into the defense of Europe means that we are no longer defending ourselves against Russia. And therefore, we have to talk about what NATO, is all about, or will then under that guise become about. Germany, is very particular about getting along with Russia. And they're saying that in many ways over and over again. I'm suggesting that this seems to be the beginning of a movement in Europe towards its own independence from America that was based on these security agreements that are most seen overtly in NATO itself. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was that it's announced that there are 150 Assadis. Assadis. That's like a sadist, but they're Assadis.
Close enough. Anyway.
In America. These are people who advocate over and over again the propaganda that we hear from Assad. Now, I'm going to name a couple of them. Noam Chomsky, Glenn Greenwald, Max Rosenthal, that guy who used to work for Trump named Banyan. All these people in the same boat because they said something that is askew from the narrative that we have with respect to Assad, which really is limited to Assad must go. And because they have a different opinion, they are now called Assadists. Nobody knows who this guy is. This Kelsey, I got his name down here. Kelsey Ratcliffe. He's the guy who came up with the list. But now he's becoming famous and loved by all the right-wing people or all the liberal, what do you call them? Neolibs.
Neolibs and neocons, the neos.
People, the neos, because he has this definitive list of these people who are supporting Assad. Now, understand, I mean, we're living in an era where, for example, I told you how Facebook took down Venezuela and analysts.com. They took down Haiti analysts.com. They take down any group that disagrees with the narrative or tries to analyze a country, even though they are the indigenous people of that country, who try to give an analysis that might differ from the narrow narrative that we advocate. And these people differ from the narrow narrative. And consequently, they are sadists. They're given a label. We don't ask whether or not their positions are right or wrong. We don't ask whether or not their analysis is correct or incorrect. We don't ask whether or not their data is based on the historical record. I should say historical record. You know, we no longer ask these questions. We ask, whose narrative is it that they're spouting? If it's our narrative, then they're good guys. If it sounds like it might be RT, or it might be Putin, or it might be Iran, or it might be Haiti, or it might be North Korea, or it might be anybody other than those we approve of, then it is wrong.
If you're not with us, you're against us.
You're with us or against us. Yeah. But this is our narrowing of our thinking within our use of our Facebook and our social media, the use of our pundits, the use of our analysis and analysts, the use of our intelligence. Everything that we're doing is narrowing our perspectives into a more and more constricted narrative.
Much like I was speaking of in terms of transparency and opaqueness, I would say that it's a universal directive to try to broaden perspectives instead of narrowing them.
Yeah.
And the idea or the goal to narrow them is almost always connected with some sort of, control.
Controlling you in 1984 sense of the word.
Mhm.
And I guess
Prosecuting
that sums it up.
thought crimes.
Prosecuting thought crimes
Think speak.
to come. Yeah. So these are the things that are happening, and this is what the data says. And now we'll pass this on into history and see tomorrow how we come out today.
Sounds good.
Okie dokie. I'm going to go and teach Galileo.
Still,
Teach about Galileo. I'm not going to teach him. He won't listen.
it still moves. Is that real? Is that a real quote or not?
I don't know. You know, there's so much that, especially when you come to Galileo, that you don't know if he did or didn't do or was a thought thing.
The legend just supersedes the person.
Oh yeah, and also some of what he did was really abstract, and because he developed a scientific method, we tend to try to put it into that method. It could precede his use of that method. You know, like this thing that I'm doing today is the dropping of the weights from the balls from the Pisa, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, to show that the pull of gravity is consistent on mass. You know, that things fall at the same rate of speed, regardless of whether or not they're heavy or light, and unaffected by air and unaffected by shape even. So that what we know is that things fall at a rate now, we know, of 32 feet per second. But the fact is that he thought about this, and people say he actually did drop these balls from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and no place in history does it say that he actually did this. But this legend, this mythology is so strong that we take it that he did.
So whose narrative do you believe?
I don't think he did it, but I'm going to teach that class today and drop the balls. And, you know, at the end of it, it doesn't matter in terms of the principle that we're talking about. But I will mention that because it's just it's a trivia question in history, but in terms of the science, it doesn't matter. We can duplicate that experiment.
Indeed.
So
once again, this has been Reach Out. Thank you everyone for listening and for watching. For Bill Jameson, my name is Justin Geist. This has been Reach Out.